In the waning days of the Fourth Age, when the memory of the Ring War had passed into legend and new perils stirred in the forgotten corners of Middle-earth, there came to the citadel of Minas Tirith a messenger bearing tidings most strange. The rider was gaunt and travel-worn, his cloak torn by bramble, and his eyes wild with terror that no rest could eat. "My lord Elisar," he gasped before the throne of the king, "I bring word from the fishing villages of Belfalas. The sea gives up that which should remain buried." King Elisar, now aged but still bearing the wisdom of his long years, leaned forward upon his throne. "Speak plainly, good messenger. What has the sea yielded?" "Towers, my lord, great towers of black stone rising from the depths near the bay of Belfalas. And with them," the man's voice failed him, and he clutched at his throat as though the very words would choke him. "With them come things that should not walk beneath the sun." The king's gray eyes grew troubled, for he remembered well the tales of drowned Numenor and the wrath of the Valar that had cast that mighty kingdom beneath the wave. "What manner of thing?" he asked. "Shapes in the mist, lord. Tall and fair they seem at first glance, yet wrong somehow. The fishermen speak of voices calling from the water, sweet as elven song, yet cold as winter's heart. 3 vessels have been lost already, their crews found wandering the shore, speaking only of a great city beneath the waves, and the need to return to its halls." Elisar rose from his throne and paced before the great window that looked out upon the Pelennor fields. Long had been the peace since the fall of the Dark Tower, yet still the king's heart was heavy with premonition. "Summon Prince Imrahil of Dol Amroth," he commanded, "and send word to Éomer King in Rohan. If the sea yields up ancient evil, we must be prepared." "Dove, my lord," ventured Faramir, who had entered during the messenger's tale, "should we not also seek counsel of the wise? Lord Elrond has passed over sea, but perhaps the Lady Galadriel's kinsman in the Grey Haven might know of this matter." "Aye," said Elessar grimly, "yet I fear this matter brooks no delay. Send riders to Círdan the shipwright, but we must ourselves ride to Belfalas ere another moon wax. There is a darkness in this tale that speaks to me of Numenor's curse, and if that drowned realm stirs once more, all Middle-earth may feel its wrath." 7 days hence, in the great courtyard of Minas Tirith, there gathered a company such as had not been seen since the days of the Fellowship. King Elisar stood arrayed in his full panoply, the crown of Gondor upon his brow, and Andúril at his side. Beside him stood Prince Imrahil of Dol Amroth, his silver mail gleaming in the morning sun, and his son Elfir, who had inherited his grandsire's love of the sea. From the mark came Éomer King, though gray was now creeping into his golden beard, and with him rode Eothen, Marshal of the Eastmark, whose spear had drunk deeply of orc blood in the days of war. From the north came emissaries of Erebor, for even King Dain's folk had heard troubling tales from their traders who sailed the Sea of Rhûn. But strangest of all was the arrival of one who had long been thought lost to the world of men. As the company made ready to depart, there came walking through the gates of the citadel a figure robed in gray, tall and bearing a staff of white wood. Yet this was not Gandalf, who had passed over sea with his ring. "I am Pallando," said the newcomer, and his voice carried the weight of long years, "called also Alatar by some, though that name I have not borne for many an age. I am the last of the Astari in Middle-earth, and I have wandered long in the far lands of Rhûn and Harad. But the sea itself has called me hither, for I sense in its depths a stirring that speaks of the uttermost west, and powers that were bound ere the world was young." King Elisar studied the wizard with eyes that had looked upon Gandalf the White in his full power. "Long have you been absent from the western lands, Pallando the Blue, yet if you are indeed of the mire, as was Mithrandir, then your counsel is welcome." "The sea remembers all things," said Pallando gravely, "and now it would give up secrets that were meant to remain hidden until the world's ending. We must ride swiftly for already the tides turned toward some dark purpose. Thus was formed the company of the sunken city, though they knew not yet what fate awaited them in the waters of Belphalas. As they rode forth from Minas Tirith, the very gulls that wheeled above seemed to cry warnings in tongues long forgotten. 5 days' hard riding brought the company to the fishing village of Edheland, where once the elves had harbored before taking ship to the Grey Haven. Now, the ancient quays stood empty, save for a few weather-beaten boats pulled high upon the shingle, their owners too fearful to venture forth upon waters that had grown strained and perilous. The village headman, a grizzled fisherman named Kulang, greeted the king with mingled relief and terror. "My lord Elisar, blessed are we that you have come, though I fear even your might may not avail against what rises from the deep places. Tell me all," commanded the king, and Kulang led them to the harbor's edge, where the waters lapped gray and cold against the stone. "It began a fortnight past," said the headman. "The sea grew still as glass, so still that no fish would bite, and no wind would fill our sail. Then, in the deep watches of the night, we saw lights beneath the water, pale and green like corpse fire, and with the dawn." He pointed with a trembling finger toward the bay. There, perhaps a league from shore, rose shapes that had no rightful place above the wave. Tall spires of black stone pierced the surface like the masts of some impossible ship, and about their bases the water swirled and eddied as though stirred by unseen currents. Even as they watched, more structures emerged, the broken dome of what might once have been a great hall, archways that framed only empty water, and towers that seemed to stretch down into darkness beyond fathoming. "By the valor," whispered Prince Imrahil, "it is like unto the tales of drowned Numenor, yet different somehow. These stones were never cut by Numenorian hands." Palando had been silent since their arrival, but now he raised his staff and spoke words in the ancient tongue of the Noldor. A pale light emanated from the crystal at the staff's head, and he gazed long upon the sunken city. At last he lowered the staff, and his face was grave. "Not Numenorian work indeed," he said slowly. "These stones are older far, shaped ere the first rising of the sun, yet how they came to rest beneath the bay of Belphalas is a mystery that troubles me greatly." "Master Wizard," said Eomer, "you speak as one who has seen their like before." "Perhaps I have," replied Palando. "In the far east, beyond the Sea of Rune, there are ruins of cities that predate the awakening of the elves. The Valar wrought many works in the shaping of Arda that are now lost to memory. But this," he gestured toward the sunken spires, "this should not be here, in these waters that were blessed by the ships of the Eldar." Even as he spoke, a mist began to rise from the water, though the day was clear and no wind stirred. Within that mist came the sound of singing, fair and sweet as the voices of the elves, yet wrong in some way that set the teeth on edge and made the heart flutter with unnamed dread. As evening fell over the Bay of Belphalas, the company made their camp upon the headland above Edhelond, though sleep came hard to any among them. The mist had thickened as darkness fell, and within it the singing grew stronger, weaving melodies that seemed to call to the very soul. Ilthaeon, the marshal of Rohan, was first to succumb to the song's allure. In the deep watches of the night, he rose from his bedroll and walked as one entranced toward the water's edge. It was only the quick action of King Elisar that prevented the marshal from wading into the dark waters. "What madness is this?" demanded Eomer, as they restrained his kinsman. But Eothen's eyes were vacant, fixed upon the misty spires that rose from the bay, and he spoke only of a great queen who called to him from halls of pearl and coral. Palando hurried to the marshal's side and placed his hands upon the man's brow, speaking words of warding. Slowly, the vacant look faded from Eothen's eyes, and he blinked in confusion. "I dream," he said slowly, "of a city beneath the wave, greater than Minas Tirith, greater than Edoras, and there was a queen there, beautiful beyond description, who promised that all who served her would know neither death nor sorrow." "A fell dream indeed," said Palando grimly, "and not a dream alone, I fear. There is power in that sunken city, power that seeks to draw the living into its halls. Prince Imrahil, who had been gazing out over the water, turned to address the wizard. "Master Palando, you have traveled far and seen much. What manner of power could raise a city from the depths and call to men's minds across the water?" "There are forces in Arda, older than the elves," replied Palando. "Powers that were bound ere the Valor set foot upon these shores. Most were made subject to the will of Eru Iluvatar in the music of creation, yet some few rebelled even against the secret fire itself. Such beings were cast down into the deepest places of the earth and the uttermost depths of the sea." "You speak of things akin to Balrog," said King Elisar, his hand instinctively moving to Anduril's hilt. "Nay, lord," said the wizard. "The Balrogs were mire corrupted by Melkor's will. What I speak of is older and stranger, the Watchers beneath, who were cast down ere the awakening of the elves for their defiance of the Creator's design. It was thought they were bound until the world's ending. Yet, if one stirs in these waters," he left the thought unfinished, but all could see the fear in his ancient eyes. As if summoned by his words, the mist upon the water began to swirl and part, and through it came a shape that made strong men cry out in terror. Rising from the depths came something that might once have been a ship, yet was built like no vessel that sailed Middle-earth's seas. Its hull was of black stone, carved with runes that hurt the eyes to look upon, and its sails were woven from what seemed like starlight and shadow. Upon its deck stood figures tall and fair, yet wrong in every proportion, with eyes like green fire and voices that sang in harmony with the deep. And at the ship's prow stood one who could only be a queen, crowned with what seemed like captured moonbeams, her beauty so great that men wept to look upon her and yet could not turn away. The stone ship drew near to the shore with no wind to fill its strange sails, moving as if the very water bore it forward by some ancient compact. Upon the strand of Edhelond, it grounded with a sound like thunder, yet gentle as a sigh. From its deck stepped the queen and her court, and where their feet touched the sand, pools of seawater appeared that reflected not the stars above, but depths unimaginable. "Welcome, lords of the sunlit land," spoke the queen, and her voice was like the sound of waves upon distant shores. "Long have I waited in the halls beneath the waves for visitors from the world above. I am Winelote, the sea flower, queen of Atiamar the drowned. Come aboard my vessel, that you might see the wonders of my realm." King Elisar stepped forward, one hand upon Anduril's hilt, though he did not draw the blade. "Lady, I am Elisar, King of Gondor and Arnor. By what right do you rise from the depths and call to the minds of my people?" The queen's laughter was like silver bells ringing beneath the water. "Right? What is right but might, and what is might but the will to claim what was always yours? These waters were mine ere your kingdom was dreamed. Mortal king, your people trespass upon the borders of my realm." "These are the waters of Belfalis," said Prince Imrahil firmly, "granted to my house by the grace of the Valor. Your realm, if realm it is, lies beneath our domain." "Beneath?" The queen's eyes flashed with green fire. "Foolish prince, you speak of above and below as if they held meaning. My city was ancient when the Eldar first set foot upon these shores. The very stones of your castle were raised from rock that was once part of my realm's foundation." Palando stepped forward, his staff raised between the company and the queen's court. "Winelote Seaflower," he said, and his voice carried the authority of the mire. "That name is not found in any lore of Middle-earth, yet I sense great age in you and power that speaks of the elder days. From whence came you to these waters?" The queen's fair features twisted with something that might have been pain or fury. "From the west I came, wizard, though not by any path your people know. When the straight road was made and the world was changed, many things were lost between the circles of the world. Some sank beneath the waves, some were cast into the void, and some found new paths through the deep places of Arda. You speak of the changing of the world, said Pallando slowly. Yet that was after the downfall of Numenor. Your city bears marks far older than that cataclysm. Clever wizard, smiled the queen, and her smile was beautiful and terrible. My city is indeed ancient. We dwelt in the uttermost west, ere the Valor came to Valinor. And when they made their realm there, we were displaced, cast into the outer waters, where we built new hall and waited. When the world was made straight, the barriers that kept us from the hitherlands were weakened, and we found ways through the deep currents to these shores. The implications of her words struck the company like a physical blow. Here was one of the powers that had been in Arda before the Valar, cast out from the Blessed Realm, and now seeking to reclaim what she deemed her rightful domain. Your coming bodes ill for Middle-earth, said King Elisar. What is your purpose in these waters? Purpose? The queen laughed again. To reclaim what was lost, to rule again what was always mine. Your people may join me willingly and know the blessing of immortality in my halls, or they may resist and be swept away by the rising tide. The choice is yours, mortal king. You offer us a choice that is no choice at all, said Éomer grimly. Slavery or death beneath the wave. Death? Queen Winnelote seemed genuinely surprised. There is no death in my realm, Horse Lord. Time flows differently in the deeps, and those who dwell in my city know neither age nor decay. Your marshal here, she gestured toward Eothen, who had begun to move toward the water once more, has already tasted of that blessing. Pallando quickly stepped to Eothen's side and spoke a word of binding, but the marshal's eyes remained fixed upon the queen. She speaks truth, he said dreamily. I see the halls of pearl and gold, where music plays eternal and sorrow is forgotten. Why do we cling to this world of pain and ending? Because it is our world, said King Elisar firmly, and freedom, even with pain, is worth more than all the bliss of slavery. The queen's court stirred at these words, and the company could see that what they had taken for fair elven folk were something else entirely. Their movements were too fluid, like kelp swaying in undersea currents, and their eyes held depths that spoke of vast pressure and lightless places. You reject my offer, said Winnelote, and now her beauty began to show its true nature. Her skin took on a pearl-like sheen that was cold rather than lustrous, and her flowing hair moved as if stirred by tides. So be it, but know this, lords of the surface world, I am not without mercy. I will give you 3 days and 3 nights to reconsider. In that time, you may test your strength against mine, if you have the courage. Send your champions into the deep places. Let them walk the halls of my city and see what wonders await. If they return to you still preferring their mortality, I will withdraw to the deeper waters and trouble your lands no more. And if they do not return? Asked Prince Imrahil. Then they have chosen wisely, replied the queen with a smile like moonlight on dark water. Come, decide quickly. Dawn approaches, and with the sun I must return to the depths. But my city rises higher each day, and soon its highest towers will breach the surface. When that day comes, my patience will be at an end. King Elisar looked to his companion. Pallando nodded grimly, understanding the trap, yet seeing no choice but to spring it. I will go, said the king. As a king, the fate of my people rests with me. Nay, lord, said Imrahil quickly. You are needed here. I know these waters better than any, and I have some skill in swimming. Let me go. But it was Pallando who spoke the deciding word. The deep magic that protects her realm will turn aside mortal strength and mortal wisdom. I must go, for I alone have power that might stand against hers in her own domain. The queen clapped her hands in delight, a sound like waves breaking against coral. A wizard! How long since one of the Astari has walked my halls? Yes, come, Pallando the far-traveled, but know that in my realm your staff will be but driftwood, and your power but the memory of sky in the uttermost depths. As the first light of dawn touched the eastern sky, the queen's court began to fade like mist. When the sun sets, called Winnelote, her voice already growing distant, Come to the water's edge, wizard. My servants will bring you down to the city beneath the waves. And remember, 3 days and 3 nights. When the 4th sun rises, my patience ends, and the tide will come for all who dwell upon these shores. When evening came again to the bay of Belphalas, Pallando stood upon the strand arrayed in his grey robe, his white staff in his hand, and upon his finger one of the lesser rings of power, wrought in elder days by the smiths of Eregion. The company watched from the cliffs above as the wizard waded into the dark water. "May the Valar preserve him," whispered King Elisar, though he knew that in the depths below, the authority of the Valar might not extend. As Pallando walked deeper into the bay, the water rose about him until it reached his chest, then his throat, then closed over his head entirely. Yet still he walked upon the sea bottom as if it were dry land, for his ring gave him power over the element. Down through the darkening depths he went, following lights that flickered like trapped stars in the distance. The pressure of the deep should have crushed him, yet the ring's magic held it at bay. Fish swam past him, strange creatures with eyes like lanterns, and once he thought he saw a great shadow passing overhead that might have been a whale or something far more ancient. At last, the seafloor began to rise beneath his feet, and he found himself walking among the ruins of the drowned city. Here was architecture like nothing in Middle-earth, spires that twisted like frozen whirlwind, bridges that curved impossibly through the water, and halls whose doors opened onto chambers that seemed larger inside than out. Phosphorescent coral had grown over much of the city, giving it an eerie beauty in the darkness. Schools of bright fish swam through empty windows, and kelp forests had taken root in what might once have been garden. Yet, for all its strangeness, Pallando could sense the power thrummed through the drowned stone. As he approached the great palace at the city's heart, figures emerged from the shadows to greet him. These were the Queen's court, no longer disguised by glamour, but revealed in their true form. They were tall and pale as cave fish, with long limbs that moved with boneless grace, and their faces were beautiful in an alien way that hurt to contemplate. "Welcome, Istari," they sang in harmony, their voices carrying clearly through the water. "Our queen awaits you in the hall of pearl and memory." Peace. They led him through corridors lined with what seemed to be windows, though instead of glass, they held sheets of water that showed visions of other times and places. Islands beneath strange stars, cities built on the backs of creatures vast as continents, and always the sea, the eternal sea that connected all things. The throne room of Queen Winnelote was a wonder that would have driven mortal minds to madness. The walls were living coral that pulsed with bioluminescent pattern, and the floor was made of compressed pearls that held the memories of every creature that had ever lived in the sea. Above, the ceiling was a dome of crystallized water that showed the surface world far overhead, where the lights of Edhelland twinkled like distant stars. Upon a throne carved from a single massive shell sat the queen, and now her true nature was revealed. She was fair still, but with the fairness of deep ocean trenches and crushing pressure. Her hair flowed like currents, and her eyes held the green light of phosphorescent plankton. "Welcome to my realm, Pallando the Blue," she said, and her voice was the sound of tides turning in the deepest places. "Few of your order have ever seen my city in its full glory. Your city is indeed wondrous," said Pallando carefully, "yet I sense great sorrow in these halls. This is not the joyous realm you showed to my companions above." Queen Winnelote's laugh was like the sound of bubbles rising through deep water. Sorrow? Perhaps. We who remember the uttermost west cannot help but grieve for what was lost. But there is beauty in sorrow, wizard, and peace in the depths where light never comes. She gestured, and the walls of the throne room showed visions of the past. Islands of incredible beauty, where beings of light walked beneath alien stars. Gardens where flowers sang, and trees bore fruit that glowed like gems, and cities that floated in the air above seas of liquid music. "This was our realm before the Valar came," said the queen. "We were the Ulundar, the children of the deep, who shaped the first mountains and carved the first valleys. We made the seas and taught the waters to flow, and in return, the waters sang for us alone. Yet you were cast out, observed Pallando. The Valar would not have acted without cause. The queen's beauty became terrible, her face a mask of ancient rage. Cause? Our cause was that we would not bow to Iru's design, would not accept limits upon our power. When the flame imperishable was kindled and the music began, we sang our own theme, one that would have made the seas cover all the land and brought all creatures under our dominion. Discord in the music of creation, said Pallando gravely, like unto the rebellion of Melkor, yet older still, older and greater, she agreed. Melkor sought to corrupt Iru's theme. We sought to replace it entirely, and for that, we were cast into the void. Or so the Valar believed. She rose from her throne and approached the wizard, her movements like the flow of deep currents. But the void has many chambers, Pallando, and some led back to Arda, by paths the Valar never guessed. When the world was changed and the straight road made, we found our way through the spaces between spaces, through the cracks in reality itself. And now you would reclaim what you believe was taken from you, said Pallando. Not believe, no, she corrected. The seas were ours before the first Vala set foot upon these shores. Every drop of water in your precious Middle-earth answers to our call, from the smallest stream to the mightiest ocean. Even now, our power grows. Can you not feel it, wizard? The tides rise higher each day, the rains fall harder, the rivers swell beyond their banks. Pallando had indeed sensed the growing unrest in the waters of Middle-earth, though he had attributed it to natural causes. Now he understood the true source of the flooding that had begun to plague the coastal land. You would drown the world, he said. I would restore it, she replied. Under the waves, there is no war, no hatred, no death. In my realm, all beings are equal. All are one with the eternal sea. Is that not preferable to your world of endless strife? She waved her hand, and the crystal dome above showed visions of Middle-earth, battlefields soaked with blood, cities in flames, children crying for parents lost to war. This is what your freedom brings, Istari. Pain and sorrow and meaningless death. Yet also joy, said Pallando firmly. Love, friendship, the satisfaction of honest work, the beauty of a sunrise, the laughter of children at play. These things have meaning precisely because they are temporary, because they must be chosen anew each day. Pretty words, said the queen, but I offer something better. Eternal bliss in the depths, where such choices need not be made. She gestured again, and the walls showed images of her city as it might be filled with life. The company walking in wonder through halls of coral and pearl, their faces peaceful, and their eyes reflecting the green light of the deeps. Your friends could be happy here, she said softly. King Elisar need bear no more the burden of ruling. Prince Imrahil need face no more the choice between duty and desire. In my realm, all burdens are lifted, all choices made. For a moment, Pallando was tempted. The visions were beautiful beyond description, and the promise of peace was almost overwhelming. But then he remembered the vacant look in Eothen's eyes, the empty peace of the truly enslaved. I have seen your gift, he said. It is not peace, but the absence of will. Not joy, but the negation of sorrow. You offer not life, but a beautiful death. The queen's eyes flashed with anger, and the water around them began to swirl. So be it, wizard. You have seen my realm and rejected my offer. But know this, when the fourth dawn comes, I will not be so merciful. The tide will rise, and all who dwell upon the shores will learn what it means to defy the children of the deep. As Queen Winilote's anger rose, the very foundations of the drowned city trembled. Pallando felt the crushing weight of the ocean pressing in on all sides, held back only by his ring's fading power. He knew that in this place, so far from the light of sun and stars, his magic was like a candle flame in a hurricane. Wait, he said, raising his staff. I would see more of your realm before I depart. Surely one who has traveled so far to visit your city deserves a complete tour." The queen paused, her fury cooling to mere displeasure. "You seek to delay, wizard, but very well. Perhaps when you see the full extent of my domain, you will understand the futility of resistance." She clapped her hands, and her courtiers swam forward to surround Pallando. Together they descended deeper into the city, past the inhabited quarters to levels where no light penetrated save for the eerie glow of deep-sea creatures. Here lay the true wonder and terrors of Ati-Amar. Libraries where books were carved from whalebone and inked with squid's blood, workshops where the queen's servants forged weapons from compressed water and armor from hardened salt. In one vast chamber, Pallando saw thousands of figures standing in rows like an army. But as they drew closer, he realized these were not soldiers, but statues, perfectly preserved forms of men and elves and dwarves, all with the same peaceful expressions and vacant eyes. "My first subjects," said the queen proudly, "sailors and merchants who found their way to my realm in ages past. They chose to stay, and now they know the perfect peace of the depths." Pallando studied the figures more closely and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold water. These were not volunteers, but prisoners, their minds trapped in coral shells while their bodies stood in eternal servitude. He began to understand the true nature of the queen's gift. "You preserve their forms, but steal their souls," he said. "I preserve what matters," she replied. "Their petty desires and foolish ambitions have been washed away, leaving only the essential self, purified and eternal." They descended still further, to the very foundations of the drowned city. Here, Pallando saw something that made his blood freeze, a vast machine built from living coral and bound with chains of kelp and pearl. It pulsed with a rhythm like a heartbeat, and with each pulse, streams of water shot upward through tubes that led toward the surface. "Behold the heart of the deep," said Queen Winnelote with pride. "Through this device, I command all the waters of Middle-earth. Every tide, every rain, every drop that falls obeys my will." Pallando circled the great machine, studying its construction with growing horror. He recognized elements of the ancient arts, techniques that predated even the lore of the Eldar. This was how the queen was causing the floods and rising waters that threatened the coastal land, not through mere magic, but through a device that literally controlled the water cycle of the world. "How long have you been building this?" he asked. "Since first we found our way back to Arda," she replied. "It grows stronger each year, fed by the life force of my subject. Soon it will be powerful enough to summon the great waves, the tsunamis that will cleanse the land of all who refuse my rule." "And after?" pressed Pallando. "When all the world lies beneath your waves?" The queen's eyes took on a dreamy quality. "Then there will be peace eternal. No more war, no more strife, no more of the chaos that has plagued Arda since its making. All will be one in the endless sea." But Pallando saw deeper than her words. In her eyes he read the truth. This was not about peace, but about revenge. The Ulundar had been cast out from the music of creation, and now their queen sought to rewrite that ancient song to make her discordant theme the only melody that remained. As they swam back toward the upper levels of the city, Pallando noticed something else. Cracks in the coral wall, places where the ancient construction was beginning to fail. The heart of the deep was powerful, but it was also unstable, drawing on forces that even the Ulundar did not fully understand. An idea began to form in the wizard's mind, dangerous and desperate, but perhaps the only hope for Middle-earth. Yet to act upon it, he would need to return to the surface first, to warn his companion of what was truly at stake. "I have seen enough," he said to the queen. "Your realm is indeed mighty, and your power great. I must return to my companions to deliver your ultimatum." "Of course," she smiled, and her smile was like ice forming on deep water. "But remember, wizard, you have 2 days remaining. When the 4th dawn comes, the heart of the deep will sing its final song, and the waters will answer." When Pallando emerged from the bay at dawn, gasping and shaking from his ordeal in the depths, The company could see at once that he bore grave tidings. The wizard's gray robes were stained with seaweed, and his staff was cracked, though it still glowed with faint inner light. "What news from the depths?" asked King Elisar, though he dreaded the answer. "News dark and dire," replied Pallando, accepting the cloak that Prince Imrahil offered him. "Queen Winnelote is not merely some ancient power seeking dominion over these waters. She is one of the Ulandar, the first rebels against Iru's design, older than Melkor himself, and filled with hatred for all the music of creation." He told them of his journey through the drowned city, of the army of ensorcelled prisoners, and the terrible heart of the deep that commanded all waters. When he finished, a heavy silence fell over the company. "Can this device be destroyed?" asked Eomer at last. "Perhaps," said Pallando slowly, "but not by any power I wield alone. It was built with arts from before the beginning of the world, powered by the life force of thousands. To unmake it would require a sacrifice of equal magnitude." "What manner of sacrifice?" pressed King Elisar. The wizard was quiet for a long moment, staring out over the waters where the towers of Atiamar rose like the bones of some vast sea creature, a life willingly given, a power freely surrendered, and not just any life, but one that burns with the flame imperishable, as do the lives of the Ainur. "You speak of yourself," said Prince Imrahil softly. "I am the last of the Astari in Middle-earth," replied Pallando. "When Gandalf sailed into the west, and Saruman fell to corruption, I alone remained to guard against the return of the ancient evil. Perhaps this is why I was preserved, why I wandered so long in the far places, to be here when the greatest threat of all emerged from the depths." "Nay," said King Elisar firmly, "there must be another way. We did not come through the darkness of the Ring War only to lose hope at the first trial." "My lord speaks truly," added Eomer. "In the days of the War of the Ring, we faced enemies that seemed impossible to defeat. Yet victory came through courage and the aid of unexpected allies." Pallando smiled sadly. "Yet this is not like those enemies, my friends. The Ulandar predate all the powers that aided us in those days. The Valar themselves could not destroy them utterly, only cast them into the void. And now they have returned, with knowledge gained in that exile." As they debated, a commotion arose from the village below. Fishermen were running toward the harbor, pointing and crying out in terror. The company hurried to see what had caused the disturbance, and their hearts sank at the sight. The tide was rising, but not naturally. The water came in a great wall, taller than a man, moving with purpose toward the shore. Yet this was not the final catastrophe. It was merely a demonstration. As they watched, the wave stopped just short of the village and began to recede, but slowly, showing that it could return at any moment. "A warning," said Pallando grimly. "She grows impatient." But even as he spoke, help came from an unexpected quarter. A horn sounded from the inland road, and riders appeared bearing the banners of Lorien, not the realm of Galadriel, which had passed over sea, but the new Lorien established by those elves who had chosen to remain in Middle-earth. At their head rode Celeborn the Wise, who had not sailed into the west with his lady, but had remained to guard the borders of the mortal land. With him came his counselors and a small company of the remaining Noldor, their faces grave with news from the north. "Hail, Elisar King," called Celeborn as he dismounted. "We felt the trembling in the waters and rode swiftly south. What evil stirs these depths?" When they had heard Pallando's tale, Celeborn's ancient eyes grew troubled. "The Ulandar," he murmured. "Long have that name been lost to memory, yet my sire Elmo spoke of them in whispers when I was but an elfling in Doriath. We deemed them a tale to frighten children, spirits that the Valar had banished before ever the Eldar woke." "Not banished, merely delayed," said Pallando. "And now they return with power to unmake all that has been built upon these shores." Celeborn studied the sunken city with eyes that had witnessed the elder days, and his face was grave with memory. "In the archives of Rivendell, ere Lord Elrond sailed into the west, I read fragments of the ancient lore. The Ulandar were not merely rebels, but something worse. They sought to undo the very foundations of Arda, to return all things to the primordial waters that existed before the music began. "Then we face the ending of the world," said King Elisar quietly. "Not yet," replied Celeborn, "for I bring tidings that may offer hope, though the path be perilous beyond measure. In my halls I have preserved one of the lost songs of power, a verse that was sung at the very making of Arda to bind the rebellious spirits into the depths." Pallando leaned forward eagerly. "You have the song of binding?" "A fragment only," warned Celeborn, "and incomplete. It would require all of our combined power to make it whole. And even then," he shook his head, "the risk is great. Such a song could bind not only the Ulandar, but all who sing it, trapping them in the same prison." "A fair trade," said Pallando grimly, "if it saves Middle-earth from drowning." But Prince Imrahil spoke up with concern. "Good my lord, while you debate high matters, the tide rises again. See how the waters creep further inland with each wave. We have perhaps hours, not days, before the Queen's patience ends entirely." As if summoned by his words, Queen Winilota herself rose from the depths, not in her stone ship this time, but walking upon the water as though it were solid ground. Her beauty was terrible to behold, for now she no longer hid her alien nature. Her skin was the color of deep water, her hair flowed like kelp in the current, and her eyes burned with the green fire of phosphorescent seas. "The time for talk is ended," she declared, her voice carrying clearly across the water. "I have been patient beyond measure, but I see that surface dwellers value their brief mortality more than wisdom. Very well, let the waters rise and claim what was always mine by right." Behind her, the sea began to swell and rise, forming waves that towered above the tallest towers of Minas Tirith. Yet still, they did not break, held in check by the Queen's will. "Last chance I offer you," she called. "Join me willingly, and your deaths will be gentle, your transformation swift. Refuse, and face the wrath of the depths unleashed." King Elisar drew Anduril, and its blade blazed with white fire. "We refuse," he declared. "Better to die free than live as slaves in your coral halls." The Queen laughed, and her laughter was like the sound of ships breaking apart in storms. "So be it. When next the sun rises, if it rises, let it shine upon a world covered by my domain." She began to sink back into the water, but Celeborn called out to her. "Stay, daughter of the depths. You speak of rights and ancient claims, but I am older than this age of the world, and remember the first music. By what right do you claim dominion over Arda?" The Queen paused, her eyes narrowing. "You are Eldar," she said, "and old indeed for one of your kind. Yet you know nothing of the true history. We shaped the first waters before your people were even a thought in Eru's mind. Yet Eru is greater than all his creations," replied Celeborn steadily, "and his will encompasses even the deepest rebellion. You were not merely cast out, you were defeated utterly, your theme shown to be false. Why do you persist in a war already lost?" For a moment, something like uncertainty flickered in the Queen's eyes. "Lost?" she whispered. "The music yet plays, Elf Lord. Until the last note fades, the theme can still be changed." "The music is eternal," said Celeborn, "and its theme was set before time began. You sing discord, but the harmony remains unchanged." But the moment of doubt passed, and the Queen's resolve hardened. "Enough! Let your music try to save you when the waters close over your heads." She sank beneath the waves, and immediately the great wall of water began to move toward the shore. This time, there would be no stopping, no reprieve. "Now!" cried Celeborn. "Join hands and sing, or all is lost." The company joined hands upon the cliff above Edheland, with Celeborn and Pallando at the center of the circle. The Elf Lord's voice rose clear and strong, singing in the ancient tongue of Valinor, while the wizard added his power to the word. One by one, the others joined their voices to the song, though they knew not the words and could only hum the melody. The Song of Binding was like nothing heard in Middle-earth since the Elder Days. It spoke of the moment when Eru first conceived the music, of the harmony that would govern all creation, and of the fate of those who would sing against the theme. As their voices rose, the very air began to shimmer with power, and the great wave that rushed toward shore began to slow. But Queen Winilote was not easily defeated. From the depths she sang her own song, the ancient discord that had been her people's contribution to the music of creation. Her voice was like the sound of storms and tsunami, of whirlpools and crushing pressure. And where it touched the song of binding, reality itself seemed to crack and warp. "Sing louder!" cried Celeborn, though his own voice was growing hoarse. "The song must be completed, or all will be undone." King Elisar added his voice to the chorus, though he knew no words of power. His was the voice of mortal determination, of a king who would not abandon his people. Prince Imrahil sang with the love of one who had always dwelt by the sea and knew both its beauty and its terror. Eomer's voice carried the strength of the mark, the power of those who love the land above all else. And in the depths, other voices began to join the song. Not the queen's courtier, but the prisoners in her coral hall, the soul she had thought safely bound. The song of binding called to all who had ever loved the light of stars and the warmth of sun, and they answered despite the chains upon their spirit. The battle of songs raged for what seemed like hours, though the sun scarcely moved in the sky. The great wave hung suspended between sea and shore, neither advancing nor retreating, caught between the competing themes. And slowly, ever so slowly, the song of binding began to prevail. Queen Winilote's voice grew desperate, wild with fury and despair. She had expected mortal voices to fail quickly, but the song drew power from something deeper than breath, from the very love of life and freedom that defined the children of Eru. Her discord, perfect in its rebellion, could not match the harmony that arose from hearts united in common cause. "Impossible!" she shrieked, rising from the water one last time. "We are the elder powers. We shaped the first seas." "Yet Eru shaped you," replied Celeborn, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "And his will binds even the mightiest of his creatures. Return to the deep places, daughter of discord. Your time is ended." The queen's form began to waver and fade, her beauty dissolving like sea foam. The great wave collapsed back into the sea with a sound like thunder, and the waters began to recede. But with her last breath, Queen Winilote spoke words that chilled the hearts of all who heard them. "This victory is but a reprieve, singers of the false harmony. We are bound, but not destroyed, and the deep places have many chambers. When the world grows old, and your descendants forget the songs of binding, we will rise again. The tide always returns." With those words, she vanished beneath the waves, and the drowned city of Atayamar began to sink back into the depths. The towers crumbled like salt castles, the coral halls collapsed, and the heart of the deep gave one final pulse before falling silent forever. But Palando's sacrifice was not required after all. As the last notes of the song of binding faded, the wizard stood tall and whole, his staff gleaming with renewed power. "It seems," he said with a tired smile, "that some battles are won not by the sacrifice of one, but by the unity of many." King Elisar sheathed Anduril and looked out over the now peaceful waters of Belfalis. The queen spoke truly in one thing: this is but a reprieve. Future generations must remember this tale and be watchful for the return of the deep power. "They will remember," promised Celeborn. "I will see to it that the song of binding is preserved in all the archives of the wise, and that the tale of this day is set down in the Red Book, alongside the record of the Ring War." As the sun set over the Bay of Belfalis, the company prepared to return to their various realms. The immediate danger was past, but they knew that vigilance would be the price of their victory. In the depths below, the Ulandar slept once more, bound by the ancient song, but dreams of vengeance still stirred in their coral tomb. And sometimes, on nights when the tide runs high and the wind carries voices from the deep, fishermen along the coast of Belfalis speak of hearing a song beneath the waves, beautiful and terrible, patient and eternal. waiting for the day when the binding weakens and the queens of the depths rise once more to reclaim their ancient domain. Thus ended the War of the Sunken City, though its echoes would ripple through the ages like waves upon a distant shore, reminding all who dwelt by the sea that some powers are older than memory and some hungers deeper than the deepest trench.